like-minded countries are interested in kind of fostering innovation, economic development, and sort of liberal human rights, like the Bitcoin's adoption, as well as other related technologies, I think will be aligned with our national interests.
So, Dr. Marwan, as the United States tries to position itself as a critical node in this great power network competition that Matthew describes, you talked to me backstage about policy decisions that you were involved in many years ago. What, if any, lessons do you think American policymakers could learn from Dubai's regulatory treatment of Bitcoin?
I think approaching any kind of new asset class with a blank sheet of paper, trying to see and understand. I think first thing is education. You really need to understand what is the underlying underlying asset, what is the technology that enables it, how does it work under the hood, and from there try to design something that not only tries to cater for this technology, but how it can make it actually thrive, and how can you as a region or as a catalyst make that technology work for the best. What is the value take from that technology? Identify that, play around with it, have a really fast feedback loop with the industry, as well as all the participants, from retail to institutionals and others, just to make sure that when you are actually moving within the space, you are actually the fastest mover, you are breaking things, and that's okay, actually, totally okay, and you're not polarizing anybody in that space.
Yeah.
You want to play and encourage the good players, and you want to really make it extremely hard for the bad players to flourish.
That makes sense. So, Brian, from your perspective, and we are closing up on time here, what would your elevator pitch be to American policymakers? What are the most critical changes needed for America to come out on top in this great power network competition?
So, some of what Dr. Marwan said, I really appreciated. Approaching this from a tech-neutral perspective, helping businesses thrive, not trying to shoehorn new things into old frameworks. I jokingly said if he's interested in running for office in Texas, we'd love to talk to him about that, because that's the sort of pro-business, pro-human thriving, innovation attitude I think I'd like to see from our policymakers. And there are different attitudes from different government entities in the U.S., and I kind of joke about this when people ask what's the biggest difference between, we have a lot of operations in Texas, we also deal with federal regulation. When I come to Washington, the question is usually, why should we let you do this? And then I go to Texas and it's, how can we help? Right? So I think the U.S. needs to be leaning more in that latter direction, rather than having regulators sort of struggling to get their piece of the territory, which often can happen. I do think, when I was at Treasury, where we worked on the concept of regulatory sandboxes and allowing new ideas to thrive, and not always just assuming the worst or looking first at risks, but you also have to look at the benefits. So sort of an attitude shift, and then there are downstream policies from that. We've seen a lot of hostility from the SEC here in the U.S. We had litigation against the Energy Department. Banking regulators have been a little bit difficult for the industry. So I think that attitude shift, broadly based across government entities, would be very helpful for positioning the U.S. to win this competition going forward.
That makes sense. So let's go to closing thoughts, starting with you, Dr. Marwan.